This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Granger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, she's one of our favorites. We talk history with her. We talk a little bit of political history, U.S. history, all kinds of fun stuff. She's also English, as you'll find out as soon as she starts talking. Sarah Stook, back on the program, talking First Ladies today. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on again.
Oh, we love having you. Welcome back. Okay, so you did this whole series on First Ladies that I absolutely love, elections-daily.com. We've linked to it. You need to read all the pieces of this multi-part series. But this is the modern age, kind of the last two pieces of this. Let's just go to the part that's really important here, because the modern age of the First Lady changed when we got television. And it's a real clear defining line. And you mentioned it a little bit in your pieces. I don't think anybody in America knew what Mimi Eisenhower looked like. Everybody to this day knows what Jackie Kennedy looked like. That really is the dividing line between the modern First Lady, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that's necessarily true. You know, Frances Cleveland in the late 19th century, her image was widely reproduced because she was young and pretty. Everybody knew what she looked like. But then you actually saw them properly through television. You saw them moving and talking, albeit in black and white, but, you know, still prominent. And that's true. That's when you started really seeing the First Lady, seeing the first family, seeing the politicians.
And it wasn't accidental. The Kennedys were very savvy. The political machinations, everybody knows the background with Joe. We won't get into all that. But we know how politically savvy and media savvy they were in a medium that was everybody was trying to figure it out at the same time. We know about Kennedy and the debates, how they mastered that. But the Jackie Kennedy stuff did not happen accidentally. That was part of the package deal, wasn't it?
It was kind of like a politically arranged marriage in medieval Europe. You look for the perfect candidate, the perfect wife. And, you know, Kennedy was in his mid-30s. He wasn't married. There were rumours he was gay in the media, which would obviously put a massive kibosh on his campaign. And even back then, politicians, they believed that you needed to be a family man. You could cheat on your wives, fine, but you needed to be a family man. And to Jackie, who he knew, she was 12 years younger than him. She was pretty, she was young, but most importantly, Catholic, from good family, not political, and would just be an asset to Jack Kennedy. And it worked, clearly, because she's still revered today. Anyone who knows me knows of my love for Jackie.
And of course, everybody knows the fashion stuff. They know the iconic status that she got. Of course, she was widowed. So the outpouring of support and love the country gave her as the first modern era widow of a slain president, that was a generational scar for a lot of people. And she was kind of the symbol of that. Behind that, though, and one of the great things about your series is you actually talk about their relationships with the president. We know all the stories about JFK. He did a lot of things. He had a lot of sex. He even occasionally had sex with his wife. What was their actual relationship like, though? Like you said, it was kind of an arranged marriage. They did have affection for each other. They'd known each other for a while. They ran in the same circles. What was their actual relationship beyond all the tabloid stuff?
Kennedy always said he didn't like a woman with opinions, sort of a product of his father. The Kennedy boys went to play around. The Kennedy girls were straight-laced, demure, married, no cheating. So he said he liked that. I mean, she wasn't unintelligent. She was multilingual. She had a job before she met him. She went to top colleges. She was a very intelligent woman, but she wasn't political. They did have affection for one another, and Jackie did know going in who she was marrying, but her father was an adulterer, and she said that's what men are like. But she was not prepared for how bad he was. He really was a love rat, to the point where she nearly left him. She had to be paid, allegedly, to stay because that would kill his political career. It was only after the death of their son Patrick that they really reconciled. But obviously, only a few months after that, Kennedy died.
How much of the Jackie Kennedy mythology and JFK by extension kind of lingers over anytime you start talking about the first ladies? Like we said, she's the first TV one, so she's the first mass media one. She's kind of the, when you talk about, fashion and the photogenic part of it, that's kind of the standard. Talk about how that's kind of been the building of the mythology of the modern first lady. That's kind of who people start comparing them to, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because she was so popular, they were always going to compare it to the most popular person, as every president would be compared to Lincoln or Washington, perhaps. So she's sort of the standard bearer. She had no major scandals in office. She was intelligent without being, maybe too threatening, which I think a lot of people don't like, especially in women. She was the standard bearer to which all first ladies are compared. Melania Trump's compared to her for fashion. Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton was compared to her. Everybody is compared to her. She is sort of the model. You want to be compared to Jackie Kennedy.
Another woman who put up with a lot from a very highly suspect personal character man was her, successor as first lady, Lady Bird Johnson, LBJ. All through the Trump years, I've kind of chuckled a little bit because people talk about how uncouth Trump is. I was like, you ought to read up on LBJ. Trump's a piker compared to this guy. LBJ was a very vulgar man, a very loud man, a very brash man. He wielded power and he didn't hide it. He was just, bigger than life in a lot of ways. Lady Bird Johnson managed to really carve herself out a little niche as first lady and as her own personality. And you want to talk about contentious relationships, though, I would love to have been a fly on the wall on some of their conversations over the year, but tell folks maybe generationally removed, she doesn't get talked about. Again, Jackie Kennedy probably overshadows her a little bit. Talk about her, because she's really a fascinating character in American history, not just as a first lady, just as a woman.
A Southern belle who had to work to help her family. She was very intelligent. She got a good inheritance, which she used very wisely to create her own radio stations to fund her husband's campaign. She was very much the demure Southern belle, quiet, genteel. She said her husband came before anybody else, even her daughters. And she was a moderating force to her husband. I mean, don't get me wrong, he treated her absolutely terribly, but he did love her, I guess, in some kind of way he loved her. And she was the one who could calm him down. If you wanted to go to get something into him, you went to her first. She apologised to Secret Service when he was rude to them. She apologised to everyone when he was rude to them, because that was pretty much guaranteed, LBJ being rude to somebody.
I find it amazing. People like JFK, people like LBJ, they didn't have to deal with the internet, how much different their presidencies and their legacies would be if they had the internet. Because, this stuff's all out there now. A lot of people don't read it because they're not history nerds like you and me. I had an uncle that actually worked in the LBJ White House. The stories of that guy and the stuff he got away, he literally exposed himself to the press on multiple occasions. Like the stuff that happened back then, we think the press and the media is bad now. Can you imagine if there was an internet when the Kennedy brothers were doing what they were doing? It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
It's mad. It's like if Joe Biden started, sleeping with Angelina Jolie, the big, beautiful movie star, like Kennedy did with Mom Rowe.
Oh, that would break the internet and not a few people's eyeballs. Moving on to other matters. Let's talk about a first lady who's probably in the rare category. She's probably more famous for what she did after the White House than being in the White House. Betty Ford. Of course, Gerald Ford has a very unique presidency because he kind of took the bullet to heal the nation after Nixon. We all know that. He was an honorable man. But Betty Ford, with her addiction stuff, this is long before people, mental health and addiction really came to the forefront. She's really known, the Betty Ford Center and that stuff. It's pretty rare for a first lady to get that kind of publicity after the White House, but she managed it.
She was a very remarkable lady who said she would give her life for her husband to have her polling numbers. Conservative Republicans, especially within his administration, like Dick Cheney is one example, didn't particularly like her because she was so outspoken on everything from abortion to adultery, gay rights, everything. But she was popular. People liked her because she was candid, she was honest. I think they wanted more of a Pat Nixon, someone who would just sort of blend into the background, not rock the boat a bit. But she revolutionised the office of First Lady. When she talks about her breast cancer, millions of women got checked because you didn't talk about that then, especially when it was women's health in such a sensitive area. And she encouraged women to get help for alcoholism and addiction because, up until that point in history, women didn't really work. So many housewives turned to drink and drugs because they had no outlet for other things, because they had no choice in what they did. And it was seen as okay, you could have a social drink and you could have your painkillers. But then Betty made sure it was okay to say, look how it affects your family and things like that.
And the thing about her is, and this is one of those things, again, the internet nowadays, we would have known it. Most people probably didn't realize that came from a very personal place with her, because like a lot of people that take up advocacy over addiction issues and domestic issues, her father, who lost her, I think she was 16 when he died, something very young, drank himself into an early grave. People didn't probably know that piece of the story, but that's really what drove her pretty much the rest of her life. It drove her in her marriage and her devotion to her husband. And it drove her when she went to go about her advocacy too, didn't it?
Well, it's believed he killed himself. Obviously, back then it was hushed up because suicide was such a big taboo. But she was terrified of people finding out. It's the same with Eleanor Roosevelt, whose father, he didn't really technically kill himself. I don't think he meant to, but he was in like a drunk maniac thing when he fell out of a window. But she didn't want people to find out. She was kind of about everything, but that was, off limits because people was questioning her husband's presidency. It's crazy. But even the idea of somebody being a bit mentally unstable or unfortunately hurting themselves, you didn't talk about it.
Yeah, and so much of what we now understand as mental health, back in the older days, people just self-medicated because they maybe didn't know what it was or how to handle it. And alcohol was the thing there. One more from that generation, though. And the amazing thing is they just celebrated their anniversary. We still have both of them. Jimmy Carter's presidency is not at the top of the list, but if you're going to have presidential marriages, he might be 1, 2, 3, somewhere real high on that list with Rosalind Carter, might he?
76 years just gone the other day. I can't imagine being married to somebody for that long.
That's longer than the normal lifespan they've been married. That's
exactly.
Amazing. God bless them. But anyway, tell us about Rosalind Carter.
She and Jimmy got married when they were very young, but they also had the benefit of they're both very long-lived. They're both in the late 90s. So adding, the youth and long-lived, it sort of helps to create a long marriage. But probably one of the most stable and loving marriages. She sat in on cabinet meetings, which I don't think is particularly appropriate for a non-official, but she only wrote notes. She didn't really sort of interject. She was her husband's counsel. They had 4 children. No hints of scandal apart from Jimmy's lust in his heart for other women comments, which obviously will probably haunt him forever. And I'm sure that Rosalind never let that one go. But she was an advocate for mental health, which I think is really great because, again, 70s, 80s, very taboo era. Known for just being a nice woman in a loving marriage, and sort of what I think everyone would aspire to in their future marriage.
That was a Playboy interview where Jimmy Carter had a moment of being too honest and saying the quiet part out loud that everybody's had the same issue with. But how quaint does that feel after the last couple of years of scandal and everything we're doing? How quaint is that the guy's like, yeah, I might have thought about another woman like 3 times in my whole life to the woman I've been married to for 76 years. I think we'd take that scandal nowadays, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, bless their hearts. They're still alive and kicking down in Georgia. We're going to get into the modern era. Sarah Stook joining us. I love talking about this stuff because it gives us perspective on history and politics. We come back. We got some heavy hitters coming up on the First Lady list. Nancy Reagan, Michelle Obama, Melania Trump that we just had. Of course, Joe Biden also. Both Bushes. A lot to cover still. Sarah Stook on her tell right after this.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to Her Tell. Sarah Stook, she's been writing about First Lady. She's our historian friend. We love having her on the program. Getting ready to do Vice President, she said. Can't wait to dig into that one. Let's go to the superstar couple. And quite literally, really, when you think, Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan, long marriage. It was actually his second marriage, believe it or not. That was a little bit of a controversy at the time. It's another one of those things that seems quaint nowadays after we just had a president that had on his third wife. Nancy Reagan, total advocate for her husband. They were just mad for each other. You always think of them as a couple. She did have some controversies, especially in the 80s with some of the social stuff that was going on. But talk about Nancy Reagan beyond the just being Ronnie's. She always called him Ronnie no matter what. Who was the actual lady, the actual person underneath all that?
Well, she came from a very established background. She was born Anne Frances Robbins, but took the name Nancy Davis in honor of her stepfather, who was actually a friend of Reagan's. He was a celebrated neurosurgeon. She was an actress who also met Reagan, fell in love, got married. He was initially a bit hesitant to get married after his first marriage ended in failure, but obviously it worked out pretty well for them. Actor William Holden was their best man. Obviously, she helped raise his children from his first marriage and children of their own. She's very controversial in that she could be a bit prickly. People said Reagan was lovely. She was a bit mean sometimes. But as you said, she is mainly devoted to Reagan. That is her, because she said everything revolves around him. She didn't have any ambitions beyond him, including their children, which meant that she had a pretty poor relationship with them, actually.
Yeah, the stepchildren and the stepmother did not get along well. One of the colorful little bits about Nancy, which I guess is a little understandable under the circumstances, but you touched on it in your piece on elections-daily.com, though, was when Reagan got shot, she got a little bit superstitious and a little bit, she went from protective to overprotective. But tell that story just a little bit, because it's kind of funny now in hindsight. I kind of get it. You're trying to reach for something, because we did find out years later he was about a quarter of an inch from dying if that bullet had been just a little bit over. But Nancy did not react to that particularly well, did she?
Yeah, well, she started consulting an astrologer to map when was best for Reagan to go out and do events. And she basically booked his schedule, so she had control of it. And she was mocked relentlessly. Some say, is it comparable to religion, or is it just, superstition? People have various views. And I think even people who believe in astrology, I'm not one of them, probably think it was a bit much. But yeah, your husband nearly died in office. That's pretty horrific. I mean, she would have seen what it would have done to, poor Jackie Kennedy. So I think you can kind of understand being a bit nervous. And the only reason why he survived was because he was in such good health. If he'd been and he was pretty old as well. So fair play to him. But if he had been in any worse condition, he would have probably died.
All right. One of the real unique women in history, because she's one of only two women to be both first lady and the mother of a president. That's a pretty exclusive club. Barbara Bush, she's actually a descendant of Franklin Pierce, who was one of our worst presidents ever, even though he was most think the most handsome president. You can take that for what you will. Very interesting story. They met. He went off to World War II. He came back from World War II. They got married. Long marriage, of course, the political dynasty. Bush Sr. did have his affairs. He had a long running affair where his secretary actually traveled with him, was kind of well known. But by all measures, especially in political terms, a very successful and happy marriage all told. Yeah.
Oh, completely. Obviously, they had the ups and downs. Their daughter Robin tragically dying of leukemia in the 50s, which is a bad enough disease now, but obviously back then you were very, it wasn't really you weren't going to have a positive outcome by any means. But she was a very strong-willed and intelligent woman. She never really worked beyond marriage, as was sort of the tradition of the time, but that doesn't make her by any means a lesser first lady. She could be very opinionated. And she got in trouble when she implied that Geraldine Ferrero was a word that rhymed with rich in her words. So, yeah, she was said very powerful, very intelligent woman who oversaw her children's lives and education, helped her son with dyslexia, which made her interested in literacy and learning difficulties. So, a pretty remarkable woman who everyone just thinks of that nice white-haired old lady.
Oh, no, she was fierce. And one of my favorite Barbara Bush stories, W told it when they did the funeral for his father. She was absolutely fierce. There's this legendary story where they're at the compound in Kennebunkport, Maine, which was their summer house, the Bush compound there. And she did not want the Secret Service following her around anymore because she's no longer a public official. And I don't care who's trying to kill me. You're not going to follow me around. I'm going to live my life. And George said it was W said it was George. Somebody told his Secret Service agents to tail her anyway. And she went to the store or whatever and caught him tailing her. She made him take her back to the compound, and they had a meeting in a room with the former president, the other former president, the head of the Secret Service detail, and Barbara Bush just dressing them all down, telling them and using pretty colorful language, depending on which version of the story you believe. This was a fierce woman. When you have a husband that's a president, a son that's a president, I guess you kind of have to be. But she was very, very, very strong, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was very, very well. Because think about it, if Reagan had died, she would have been first lady quite a few years earlier, 8 years earlier, and raising children. I mean, all her children, apart from the dearly departed Robin, were involved in politics and public life in some respect. I mean, Jeb could have been president in a crazy what if please clap world.
Please clap. Since we're pairing them anyway, let's just go ahead and talk about Laura Bush. Kind of the opposite of Barbara in a lot of ways, although they had some similarities. They were both, very, very well apportioned women, very proper. They knew how to play the role. She was a librarian of all things. And then, of course, W's been very open. He was basically a fall down drunk for about a decade. She kind of helped him through that. He found religion. He stopped drinking. He was a dedicated family man with her by all accounts. Talk about Laura Bush, because she's another one of those. She mostly stayed out of the spotlight, pretty much avoided controversy of any kind. And yet she was just kind of always there, kind of, textbook first lady stuff. Yeah.
I think she gets forgotten because she was between Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama, two, Ivy League educated women with full career. Well, I'm not saying that her career wasn't full, but they were lawyers, so extra education, etc. But she was very popular because she wasn't at all controversial. Her issues included reading, heart failure, breast cancer, and women in Afghanistan, which is probably the safest issues any first lady could go for. And up until that point, I think probably the Bush presidency was a time where it was more likely a woman could become president, but she was still, a bit of that old school generation. She was born in the 40s, married in the 70s. So while, the sexual revolution had happened, there was that more tradition of, being a bit more demure. But she wasn't political either. She said, look, I'm not interested. She voted, but she wasn't, she was a bit of a Jackie. She didn't really care that much, which I think helps her a lot, because if she'd been tarnished with her husband's brush, then she'd be very popular, because obviously we know how his presidency ended.
Sarah Stook joining us. Okay, her predecessor, of course, you just mentioned her, the opposite of that, the uber ambitious, uber political Hillary Clinton. where do we start with her? Because we know a lot more about the Clinton presidency now than we did then. Again, another one of these, we first got the internet with the scandals. That was kind of the Drudge Report and all that got the Lewinsky story out there, but it wasn't like it was now. The stuff he got away with in Arkansas, we know the allegations and all that long before that. Where do we start parsing out Hillary Clinton? Because she was a senator in her own right later. She ran for president a couple of times. There's just a lot of stuff there. But as far as her being a first lady, how do you kind of view her and package her up when it comes to the historical nature of being a first lady and then becoming a political figure in her own right afterwards?
Well, obviously, I try to be as nice as possible when it came to the first ladies, though I was honest if they had their shortfalls. Not a huge fan of Hillary. I respect her in some right. I mean, she went to Yale Law when probably not many women did. She was very intelligent. I'm not going to dispute any of that about her, and I respect her. But I think a first lady should be allowed to have opinions. I mean, if I was first lady, I certainly would. And I think it's great when they have their views on politics. If you look at, Eleanor Roosevelt, for example, my favourite first lady, but she made the mistake of trying to basically be an official when she wasn't elected. And it would be the same for any man, woman related to the president. When she was put on leading the Commission on Healthcare and trying to do legislation, fair enough, she had some experience, but people questioned it. Why is this unelected person leading the charge? And she wasn't popular. She made comments about stay-at-home mothers, which I know obviously they are rarer now, but they are just as equal and deserving as respect as career women. And I think that was a very, very bad idea.
I always wondered with Hillary, I think what you just said about her being an official when she wasn't, then there was the stand by your man stuff. There was the victim shaming that she engaged in as part of protecting the Clinton brand, which was self-protection for her. You just can't talk about the Hillary stuff without the hypocrisy stuff, because that's what really sunk her on a lot of this. And some of it's probably a little unfair, but some of it she brought on herself. But when she was actually first lady, the healthcare thing, I think, just kind of dented her, where they put her in charge of healthcare and that failed. I don't know that she ever really recovered, because from that point on, she no longer got to be seen as a first lady. From then on, it was always, oh, she's political. And I think that's the big difference when it comes to Hillary. Is I don't think she ever really had a period in the White House where she was just the first lady and nothing else.
She tried. She did a few sort of, events like the Easter egg roll and Christmas. But, like I said, she was never, people said she should have been president instead. I think there's been a few first ladies where they would have sort of been candidates for president, in that they were very political, ambitious women.
Yeah, and then we had Edith Wilson, who actually did it, but that's another topic for another day. Michelle Obama, fascinating thing. She actually, you mentioned in your piece, I didn't know this. She actually met Barack, or Barry then, because she was his mentor when he was an intern. So that's kind of an interesting story. But you're talking about ambitious. She's the opposite. She tells everybody that will listen that she has no ambition for politics. She didn't like being in the White House, particularly because of the political stuff and the things that went on, but a very smart, astute woman. Not a whole lot of major controversy, although she is outspoken and opinionated on certain things. But talk about Michelle Obama, kind of one of our more contemporary first ladies.
I mean, she went to Princeton, Harvard. She's only first lady with 2 Ivy League degrees. So, you've got to say that's pretty darn impressive. And I think, like you said, she is political in somewhat of it. She has her views, but I think unlike Hillary, she has the benefit of that she's not politically ambitious for her own sake. She doesn't want to be involved in politics as a politician. And I think people like her more than like Hillary for that, because she's still an intelligent woman and a good role model. But then she has had her critics when she said she's never really been proud of America and things like that. I kind of understand what she was trying to say, but the way she said it isn't the greatest way of conveying your views. So, but I don't think people would remember that as much as Hillary's mistakes. Maybe people have a short memory when it comes to Michelle as opposed to Hillary.
Yeah, I think Hillary shades Michelle a little bit because Hillary is so ambitious. I think a lot of people just assumed that Michelle was going to be ambitious like that, and she's not, which I think is I have my criticisms of the Obamas, but I think that's a little unfair. I think she got tagged, especially since Hillary ran against her husband. They're like, oh, well, she'll run too like Hillary. And it's like, no, they're different people, very different people. So I think that was a little unfair. All right, Melania Trump. We've got a little distance from the Trump administration. I think history will be decently kind to her, even though her husband continues to do things that will probably cause history to not be kind to him. I think she bore it about as well as somebody in that circumstances could bear it and handle it. What's your take on our last former first lady that we had, Melania Trump?
I don't know if history will be particularly kind, because I think there's very much an anti-feminist slant to the treatment of Melania Trump. Now, she posed nude as a model, which is something I would never do, but that is her prerogative. And people criticised her for it, but she's never been hypocritical about it. She's never been like an open prude or say, no, women shouldn't do this, women shouldn't wear that. And the people who say celebrate body positivity and celebrate other women are extremely critical of her. And I believe if she'd been a Democrat or not married to Donald Trump, she probably would have been on the cover of a lot of fashion magazines because she's an elegant person. I wouldn't say she was an outstanding first lady, but she didn't want the job. And you've got to sort of understand that.
I don't know. I don't know what their relationship is because obviously there's an arrangement there. People like that do not have normal marriages. They just don't. They're not like people that are working 9-to-5 jobs. I don't think she wanted to be there, and I give her slack for the fact that she didn't want to be there, but she went on with it anyway. So and I'm no fan of her husband's, but I don't think she did any great disgrace to the country. I know political opponents will smear her for this, that, and the other, but it could have been a lot worse. Can you imagine if she was uber political like her husband was? I think it was about as good as it could have possibly been. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say she's ever going to be ranked as a highly placed first lady. Her campaign against bullying is a little strange considering what her husband can be like on Twitter, or was before he was unceremoniously banned. Obviously, she had that "I don't care" jacket. So, and Meg Bertha comments, which sound bad, but then you remember she didn't really do much else in terms of scandal or being a first lady generally.
Yeah. All right. Real quick before we gotta let you go, though, our current first lady, Jill Biden, not her given name. I'll let you get into that in a second, but she has her doctorate in education. First lady to have an official job outside of the White House. I think that's actually something we'll probably see more of as we have, we've already had a couple of lawyers. I think nowadays, if you had a Hillary Clinton or even Michelle Obama, I think if they wanted to work, it would be accepted now. I think we'll see that in the future. But we don't want to do a legacy thing because she's still doing it. But Jill Biden as our current first lady.
She's not really had the opportunities to do as much, maybe because of COVID's put a damper on a lot of events. Easter egg roll and everything like that is associated with the first lady, which maybe gives her more time to go and do other things. But I think she has options if she wants somebody to step in. Like Kamala Harris can do some of it. Kamala Harris's husband, their daughter, she has the opportunity. All the older first ladies who were maybe poorly would have their daughters or daughter-in-laws do it. I don't think she's sort of a traditional first lady in that, she's not going to do the responsibilities as much as we'd expect. Even like Michelle Obama did that, and she was a very intelligent, educated woman. As for if they'll work, I think that will depend on who the president is. I think Republicans might be a bit more wary. I'm not saying they oppose women working, but they might be a bit more thinking how a first lady would act. So if Ron DeSantis became president, how would his wife be versus any Democrat?
Yeah, she's pretty traditional, but we'll have to wait and see. One last thing on Jill Biden, though. She's had some missteps vocally. I think her current controversy down in San Antonio is a city I've spent a lot of time in over the years.
The taco thing, she said.
Breakfast tacos, breakfast burritos let's not even get into that portion. I think I blame the speechwriter because she's just reading the copy they gave her. But still, you got to have a little bit of bearing. But she can't be doing stuff like that. She is going to start getting flack. But that's part and parcel of the comm shop of this entire White House. They're not real good at stuff like that. They do a lot of cell phones like that. Anyway, Sarah Stook, we love having you. We love talking about this stuff. Gives us some historical perspective on current events. You already told us you're going to do vice presidents next. I can't wait for that series. Let folks know where you're writing, what you're writing on, and your social media so they can follow you until we get you back on Heard Tell again.
Elections Daily, the Mallard, which is a British publication. My Twitter is at Sarah_Stook, which is STOOK. I forgive you if anybody mispronounces it, because everybody does apparently, or can't spell it. So it'll be easy to find me because there's not many other Stooks or Sarah Stooks on Twitter.
Either which way, however you say it, you do fantastic work. We love having you on. We'll do it again real soon, my friend. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.